more collaborative work between the teams. So the space is exactly as we designed it, and we also have people kind of set up in different ways so that it encourages movement, encourages people to get up. And
does the designers work as a team, so assigned to different teams every time, or are they assigned to different kind of parts of the projects? Are they assigned to 100% to one project for a while?
Oh, sure. Want me to take a picture?
The way we staff.
Actually, it's full recording.
Oh, got it.
Thank you so much.
Sure.
The way we staff, the designers are at the core of the team. So rather than being a group that kind of move in and out and or just execute, they actually, they and the project managers make up the absolute core team. So, when you start a project, the designers and the project managers will spend time talking with the proponent or the partner and doing a series of interviews and trying to understand how people are describing what they need and how we need to often what we call reframe. So we have to get them to kind of keep going beyond how they are describing it and to get to often the root cause of what they're saying. Then we do a lot of observations and we do a lot of time with their patients, and even at that point we may then be able to write up a research proposal. So we may do a lot of pre-work, and so the designers come in at the very, very beginning before we can even have a research plan and do a lot of kind of front loading of the work, and they work with the project managers, and then we scope it, we describe how long it's going to take, what kind of resources, if they need more resources, they'll come back to ops and ask for more resources, what IT role, and they'll just describe a lot of things in detail, and then we have a contract with the people that we work with. So we're there from the beginning because it really drives, because we're researchers, we're not designers, we're design researchers, and so the research is done through a methodology that is the one we know really well. So we don't come in afterwards, and the project manager is the one who's going to help us be very organized, and strategies around communication and strategies around kind of goals and goal setting. Resource allocation, all that kind of stuff. Project managers do that with us, so it's a really, really important relationship that we have.
Yeah, when I first started, I think the teams were a designer might be on multiple platforms of work. Project managers the same way, they were split, and that was largely by design to try and encourage cross-pollination of information and also have just explore different interests of work. Other people had certain interests. We found, though, that as we're getting further and further into this, and the platforms are getting much more focused and much more intense in terms of the goals that need to be delivered, that it was becoming very difficult to be split. So they would have it almost had to be two different people to work in a future works versus a practice redesign. So we've kind of organically migrated to having set designers and set project managers on each platform. So they work on practice redesign and all the experiments that come with that, versus being spread about the place. So.
And that's tough because that's very expensive as a resource, because the traditional model, again, if you were consulting, would be that you'd work on lots of things and you'd kind of dip in and dip out and dip in.
That's right.
And we've tried that, and I think that to Donnie's point, the work we're doing is, it's just systemic. It's massive. These issues we're looking at, and people have to, first of all, it's all about establishing relationships, and so you have to kind of get in. The first couple of months in a project are just kind of basically getting trust from people, and then you kind of pick away, and as months go by, you start to uncover things that people didn't tell you. So it actually, these projects can run for years. The big ones can run for years, in terms of as you think you're finished, you kind of peel back another layer, you discover something else, and you peel back another layer, and then the people you work with actually say, no, we want you to go deeper, we want you to get to the bottom of this. So you could be, with Project Red, that got extended and extended and extended because the person working on it was discovering so many things that the team wasn't aware of, and they said, you have to keep working on this.
So that means that one kind of platform has a designated designers, maybe 5 or 6 of them only working on that platform. Is there kind of crossover experience as well, or it's mostly just kind of focusing on
Okay. Right now? It may change again in the future, but given what we've been asked to do this year, and actually last year, we were asked to work on, Dr. Noseworthy, the CEO, he described the strategic goals for the institution, and then also said that every single person at Mayo Clinic was to get behind those goals and not to have separate goals. So we really looked at the projects that we were doing and we cut anything that wasn't feeding straight into. And so by doing that, we really kind of got on people's radar because they were trying to deliver the strategic goals, and then they heard, oh, we're doing these projects. So we now have massive projects, whereas before we had much smaller ones, and now they're huge. And so I think for now we're going to have to keep people dedicated.
Dedicated, okay.
But it's hard because then when people come and ask you to do something else, you don't have any resources.
How many doctors full time?
None full time.
We have, I would say, about 7 or 8 that are physicians that are like formally tied to the center. Generally, their time allocation is about 20%, so they're still practicing or sitting in different committees or whatever, and they dedicate about 20% of their time to the center. And then we have what I would term collaborative physicians that we actually don't formally pay for any of their FTE, but they're working kind of side by side with us to help develop some of these ideas. Full-time employee. Sorry.
It's a value number.
Right. So it's hard to total that many because those are more informal. Several dozen though, at minimum. So this part of our space is kind of drop-in space, and it's really designed for like physicians that either collaborative or formally assigned to us. If they're not here every day, or they may only be here a couple of hours, they'll drop in. They can plug in, with their laptops or whatever, work over here for a few hours. Or it's also like informal conversations gather all the time. So this space has actually become quite heavily utilized.
Like right now, Maggie's working with I know you're fine. Actually, Susan here thinks that Maggie and Matt are working with a designer who's in London who spent some time here and used to be full-time here and went back to school. And so he was here last week, and so we're experimenting a lot more with people kind of teleworking. Often we also don't have a lot of space, and the talent pool. So these spaces then they're evolving into being collaborative spaces for the team as well.
Right. So we can make them. Oh, yeah.
I'm not a good photographer. So, do you have many pictures describing the environment, atmosphere of this center?
We have some. Linda can put some together.
Instead of using his photos on that newspaper, maybe official picture would be a bit more better.
And this is just additional project space, so we kind of have our own kind of cutting center and a creative graph center. And this space actually has kind of become, so we do Transform, which is an annual international symposium every September. It's growing. We had about 800 attendees last year. It's held here in Rochester, and the planning team here utilizes this space. It's a yearly project essentially to keep this thing going. This other space has just been it's cycles. So we had Project Red, which Lorna mentioned before, which was a redesign of the dialysis center. A curriculum team was working here. It's just kind of whatever. Things kind of cycle in and out, and we use it as we need it.
We work so much as teams, and so we'll show you later on. We have some teaming rooms, and we basically don't have enough. And people don't work as individuals. I mean, they kind of spend a little bit of time, but they spend most of their time together. So all of the shared space is really becoming more team spaces. And I think a lot of it is also having wall space, because as you work, we need to be able to visualize so everyone can kind of agree. You can't have everything on your own computer and be describing it. But you have to. It's almost like you have to create a shared vision, and the work has to be shared. So it has to be up there, and then when you walk away, that's the project. It's not the people don't own the project. The project has its own identity, so we need to give it space. Otherwise,
it's definitely evolving. I'd say if you came back in a year, this space will look different than it does today. And again, just some additional project space. Actually, this was taken up with a wellness module a couple of months ago, where we kind of had an audio tour of a lot of wellness research, wellness coaching. It's been taken down since, but something else is springing up. So
you might want to think about giving some people some formal. We should start allocating these spaces.
Yeah,
this could be some of the space.
Right.
Team.
Actually, I was talking to Naomi, and the Hale Room. They're moving to a model of really moving over to Charter House, which would.
But I'm just wondering if even Heidi and Jay Paul in this
Yeah.
place, considering
the time they're going to spend.
or Nest.
And then, as Lorna mentioned, there's these are our project rooms, and so these are the platforms of work that we have. And we can, like, this is Community Health Transformation Room. So this team, there we go. So these rooms are basically designed to where the teams can come in, work, create, brainstorm, and they don't have to take everything down immediately and then go back to their spaces. They can leave it up, make it messy, do their work, and just add on to that as the months go by. So this project actually is looking at kind of a proactive health around a community. So there's a small community, Casson, which is 30-40 miles west of here, in Dodge Center, and they're looking at Casson community as a whole, as a kind of, instead of episodic care, more of a proactive care, engaging the community, engaging the schools, engaging the employers. And they have a robust number of experiments around that concept.
Forgive me, I speak in Korean. 보통 이렇게 다른 데 가서 이렇게 프로젝트 할 때 이렇게 돼 있나요? 다른 데 나가면?
방을 이렇게 저희가 쓰지는 못하죠, 지금.
근데 가령 이제 이런 식으로 이제 뭐 이렇게 하는 게 좀 특별한 건지 아니면?
제가 알고 있기로는 그때 그 프로그나 아니면 더블린이나 이런 걸 보면 이런 식으로 합니다.
이런 식으로.
예, 그래서 이렇게 he's actually asking about like whether this is like a very common kind of surroundings for a project like design projects like this. And actually, I saw like some cases.
Very. I mean, it's typically called a war room, which is, I guess, comes from the idea of military tactics and strategy. And so it's, to Donnie's point, what's most important is that it can stay up, because you really need to have work where even as an individual team member you can come into a space and continue to work, and if it becomes something that gets folded up in a notebook or closed up in a computer, it's really hard for it to have kind of a dynamic. So these spaces are really important. And we also meet with larger groups, so that's the core group, but if you bring in people from outside who are partnering with us in the clinic, bringing them into the space, they see, you can show them the progress of the work. You can have a conversation and you can kind of wreck them, so it's like a prop for all the different conversations that you can have. And then you can just kind of, it's how you agree on things, like where are we in the project, and you can kind of, this is how you all agree. And often if you have to debate back and forth, you look at your options, and it's very much about how you manifest your project. And it's really important. I think before, because we didn't have this space, people would come to meetings with computers, and they all had a different version of the project. Like they all thought in their head, this is where, but no one had a shared. And they didn't have a way of knowing a really shared vision of where they were at a moment in time on a project. And that's back to this communication. So I think these spaces help so much.
You really get to sort of the shared meaning. It's really important, isn't it?
It's so important.
And so this is like the mapping, for example, of the Casson community, and this is I think the ideal world, and this is where Casson is at the time, and so all of these artifacts have some degree of visualization.
This one, remember we were talking about the e-consultations, and we were talking about our methodology. I mentioned it wasn't exactly linear, with the framing and scanning, the researching, experimenting, the prototyping on into implementation. So this would show the e-consultations. That's really moved on to implementation scale. So it's really out there. But what we try to do in the portfolio of projects is have projects that are at the various points along the way. This is that connected care asthma that connects that we talked about.
Now that connects.
Yeah. And then, each one of these has a story. using Skype to connect to patients that would like to complete their summary visit at home and not stay at the clinic because it gets to be really expensive. And
Alaska's telemed.
Yeah. So
you told us.
it's just a visual for you to see how it sort of comes together around
Very
the platform. Yeah.
So this project is like still ongoing, right?
It is. The platform is ongoing, and the e-consults we don't have an active role any longer. That's really moved into implementation across the entire clinic. Even though some would say there's always an opportunity to apply more innovation, to think about what's the next generation, like the iPad 2. So how do you think about the e-consult version 2.0? We did what we did at the time with the information we had, and now we're ready to think about it differently. So are things ever completely over? I don't know.
So like, as a project manager, when is the start and when is the end? Like, how do you actually manage these?
Well, I mean, that's great. We're making good progress on that. I think the initial couple of years of the center was heavy on design and heavy on recruiting to get work and to build credibility and all those things, right, that centers do in an early stage. Now we're at the point where we have a pretty robust level of portfolio of work, and now we're trying to manage what we have in a very effective way. So we've recently been talking with the project managers about mapping every project and experiment that we have lined up, kind of the key couple of goals that need to be required before they move to the next phase of methodology, and then the timeline. So we're going to be kind of working with the teams on an operations and strategic level on how to try and move some of this along so that we can open up pathways for other things to come in.
So like so far there wasn't like a one or two projects which was kind of just called off or just kind of like removed from like a whole kind of portfolio. Was there any one like that, or like still it's like everything was kind of embryonic stage, so we still like kind of like I don't know, like just kind of holding everything on the plate and just still watching which thing's gonna die out or like grow faster.
Some have evolved even to the point where we considered it. So like OB-NEST, for example, is kind of taken on. Initially, we were going to look at this and it was going to be done, and then because the work was so evolving and the clinicians loved what we were doing, we've extended it and we've added it and we've added to the scope and so on, which is great.
Yeah. What of the opposite case? Like.
Yeah, there's been a few that we've either implemented or that we need to find homes for. For the most part, we had one recently where we had our caregivers project, which was a really dynamic project around assisting individuals with cognitive disorder. The caregiver model, so assisting the caregiver essentially. That one had gotten to a point of being somewhat stalled because we were looking for an operational home. We were looking for funding. We were trying to take it external. So we were kind of in a decision scenario of that one, but fortunately we were able to break through that. It was on hold, right? So we have a few of those where we've come to a point and they've gotten on hold, and we need to kind of discuss on an individual level what we need to do with those projects.
Who makes the decision call on that one?
30 seconds? Excuse me.
Sure. I better take it. Let me leave this with you.
All right.
We don't want to record.
Who makes the decision?
On like whether that hold on or like what's going on.
Our operations. We have a group called Ops, which is it deals with operations prioritization and strategy. So that's our leadership team. That would be Lorna, myself, and Donnie, Nick LaRusso. Then we have our head of communications, and then three other physician leaders that form this really strategy and operations team. We meet every week.
So it's
and
a
what we're
weekly
trying to
based,
do
committee type
weekly, right? And we come together to really take a look, at basically our resources and how we're utilizing our resources. Lorna and Donnie and I do a lot of that, just in trying to bring recommendations forward to our physician partners. So it seems to be a better use of time that we have a recommendation about how we should proceed. I mentioned that Mall of America, and it's so wonderful. They've never heard of the Mall of America. I love that.
That's so good.
We love that. It's like the largest shopping mall in America. America. It's like, oh my gosh. Well, so the Mall of America now is very interested in our engagement to help understand the experience and to synthesize a lot of work that's been done. So sometimes they're projects that are identified by our CEO or other people in the organization. That how do you say no? So we have to always balance. But right now, it's pretty fair to say that we're overcommitted. We're trying to bring in more resources so we can create our we can maximize our bandwidth or expand our bandwidth. But we've been on such a growth trajectory over the last few years that the idea of really slowing our growth, because when you get over 50, 60 people, it really changes the nature of how you work.
Yep, that's true.
So we're thinking we're about where we need to be, add a few more, and then really it has to be about reprioritizing and shifting and stopping and not starting and all those things, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, through all this data collection, we've figured out we've got about 160 projects and experiments going right now. So
160.
160.
And you have how many people here?
Yeah, roughly 50.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we've got a lot of stuff going on.
So that means like some numbers has to be like on hold, and maybe some other projects has
or they're in different stages of the methodology.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
So some may be heavy in the research side, some may be on the implementation side, or somewhere in between. So it takes a different skill set depending on where it's at.
And one of the things we're trying to figure out is how much capacity we have for things. I mentioned the work that's been going on around the competency of innovation. There's been such a strong and wonderful conversation going on around the country around what we're building here and such an interest in almost being a consultant to other organizations. So we could build out a consulting service, but that's really not what our focus is. Our focus is really innovation and care delivery. So we hardly ever say no when people want to come here and visit with us and share what it is we're doing. And even in some circumstances we've gone to organizations to share our work. But we try to really, we don't have enough capacity to be building out, that part of our organization. So, right?
No, there's a real appetite for it. I mean, one thing that we try and do is we try and encourage people to speak at conferences. Yeah. So more and more, we're really stressing the importance of the teams writing up, submitting white papers, trying to get, because that way, at least we're sharing stories. And it's actually, I think it's working. People are presenting.
Practice redesign, we mentioned, and focus more on the outpatient. So this is a, multidisciplinary team that's meeting and working on that. We didn't talk at all about this, Donnie.
Okay.
So maybe you could talk about Rock Health a little bit about the model.
So FutureWorks is a platform. So we have 3 care delivery platforms: the practice redesign, care to distance, and community health. FutureWorks kind of stands aside from the care delivery model, and it's looking at kind of more external involvement. So, for example, they're looking at the whole Rock Health portfolio of startup companies and trying to determine if there's a fit with one of these companies in Mayo to partner to help develop or design a product that of course we could use, but externally that would be marketable for healthcare in general, right? So this team is looking at that. They're also looking at the projects that are, I think, what was it was 100 to 1 impact, I think was what Frank Moss had mentioned. And so these projects are a 10 to 1 impact is kind of the overall. It's not a goal necessarily, but it's like a litmus test. The projects they take on are like 100 to 1, so they would massive impact.
High risk. The idea that it may not work.
Right.
But still, if it works, it's big. Okay.
So kind of an incubator of that type of activity.
Because I kind of guess the idea, the kind of magnificence, but the high risk for this. But what kind of ideas coming out in this room? Because the other ones, it's easy to kind of think, care at distance, okay, kind of ubiquitous health, some kind of idea I can kind of imagine. But about FutureWorks, can you give us 1 or 2 kind of examples of what?
Well, I think the caregiver, it didn't start in there. So this is a relatively new platform. But what we had as an example, and I think one of the reasons that we knew we needed this platform was that we were doing work around caregivers, and so particularly caregivers of patients with dementia because they're high risk. And so looking at, again, thinking about a user beyond a patient, but thinking about other people that might consume our services or need it. So the caregivers, kind of knowing that there's an aging population, that knowing that, I'm not sure the number, but there's like millions and millions of unpaid family caregivers, and so the economic and social impact on just days lost at work and a lot of issues around with an aging population, people are more and more having this experience. It's kind of the sandwich generation, kids and aging parents. But particularly with dementia and Alzheimer's, it's really isolating. So they often die first. And so you have people in the kind of advanced stages of Alzheimer's and then their caregiver dies. And so they are really profoundly sick and now they're without a caregiver. So we've targeted a previously invisible population to Mayo and actually really gone after understanding how can we create services to promote their health, to promote them kind of in support networks, to kind of connect them with the aging with the expertise here, to connect them into their community with each other. So we're developing a kind of a very different business model around thinking about people consuming a service that's not a traditional medical service, but it's more a service around kind of supporting. It also has legal and financial services, so it's kind of tying all their needs together, and that's very radical for Mayo. I mean, that's a completely different business.
Sure, of course.
Yeah, that perfectly makes sense because it's not like a category fits into the care like a distance or outpatient practice, but it's kind of more futuristic.
And it's non-traditional. I mean, I think we don't necessarily think, future works is kind of funny. It's almost you can look in the future, but you can look laterally and you can think about what's Mayo not currently doing, but could be doing. And so we're not exclusively that it has to be about the future, but it has to be about untapped opportunities.
Which Mayo didn't actually tap yet.
Do before. And so even with Rock Health, it's a lot about it's all tech. So it's a kind of incubator group out in the Bay Area, and they look at mostly tech applications for healthcare. So it's just people who are developing ideas that are kind of the kind of tech community contributing into healthcare. And so it's a portfolio of, but it's a particular group. So we're now kind of thinking, who else is going to work in healthcare and who else is going to be kind of playing in that field. So we should have partnerships with them early, because they may come up with radical ideas. And so the partnership right now is we give them access to the clinical practice. They can come and test their ideas here. We partner them with physicians, and they can test their concept in a clinical setting. That's very hard to get access to a clinical setting. And then we get to basically to kind of IP, shared IP, and we get to kind of have equity in their companies, and that goes back to Mayo, which is a not-for-profit, so it all goes back basically to Mayo in terms of used for other research. So and that's non-traditional. So these are non-traditional business models more than or as much as they're non-traditional ideas. It's like almost in the execution, it's different.
So that's like actually higher risk in some sense, because you don't really know that's really going to make a business case or
and people don't. I mean, things that are, it's hard to do it. I mean, some of these projects, because they're non-traditional Mayo, when you try and sell them up the leadership ladder, people don't understand it. It becomes
can't really imagine
and they say no. So
easily.
Finding a way of kind of navigating a new idea through the hierarchy. So it's less about the science fiction of the future and more about what are we not doing that we could be doing.
Interesting.
Kind of our last body of work is the HALE lab, which is healthy aging and independent living. And we actually have it's probably a misnomer to call it a lab, really, but it's an observational space over in Charterhouse, which is an assisted living, an advancing assisted living place for retirees. And it's the whole idea is we're creating this consortium of companies that are interested in wellness and aging in particular, and they're setting up a series of different experiments. So it may be product experiments, it may be concept experiments, and then they want to test them over in that living space with volunteers, and just do a lot of observation as to how those would be, how those types of things would be applicable to the real world. So
Interesting.
actually, Molly's one of the designers here on staff, and she wore what is that apparatus
LVAD.
anyway? LVAD.
It's when you basically have a pump put into your heart, and it's you then basically have to wear this external device, and you also have to have backup batteries and stuff. And it's,
wow.
it's really badly designed.
She wore it for 2 weeks straight just to get a sense of
you wear it in the shower.
How like not comfortable it is.
Right.
Like, trying to kind of find out what could be like. This actually kind of like sounds very kind of a ordinary kind of case for a design firm to kind of,
This is exactly. I mean, it's interesting. Sometimes people gravitate, every now and again towards things that are really tangible. And Molly came in, and this group are determining and defining all of their research. And while they're figuring out the long-term strategy around aging, there's some tangible things that people will describe. You're right. I mean, the moment they say it, they start to describe all these things that are kind of annoying about being aging, rather than this is not typically what we do. We don't typically work on devices too much. What you
More
can
about
do
like
is-
service, right?
But you can examine an experience through a device, and so sometimes a device becomes a way of looking at and starting a conversation. And then you actually expose lots of things about people's assumptions about things, and a lot about the medical team that end up deciding that this is a good option for someone, and then that person has to reconcile their life is so impacted, and so we don't have conversations with patients before this happens to them, and they have no idea this is going to be their life, and so this almost exposes what we're, again, the absence of good conversation and good decision making and choice. So it's at one level it's just about a device, and at another level it's about how good are we at helping these patients make choices, so they end up being really restricted in what they can do after we give them a procedure. I mean, so many of them don't want to end up like this, and we didn't tell them beforehand. So it's an interesting topic.
So is it possible that maybe later on, if this kind of project moves on, like Mayo can actually talk to the device companies and maybe like do some kind of joint venture kind of type of thing, or?
They're doing it a little bit. They met with the company and they said that they're going to be redesigning it, but apparently the redesign takes so long, and then also the battery, as most things, battery technology is always lagging behind, and so they need to have, your heart stops if you don't have this thing. So, and that's what's curious is you become, the idea of being dependent on a device and dependent on being close to a power outlet is something you can't describe to someone. I mean, I could describe it to you and you could agree, and then when they actually live the experience,
it's like life or death situation.
Yeah, so it's something that's very hard to talk to people about. So Molly, Molly, M-O-L-L-Y, Molly McMahon.
What's she wearing?
She's wearing the LVAD. She's wearing the bump, and
저게
then
저
she has
심장에다가
it.
이걸 연결을 했는데 이게 그 배터리가
It's,
꺼지면 심장이
And it
멈춰버리는
has
거예요.
it's like
so like a ventricular
it's
assistance.
It's got a battery. It's basically a valve, and it pumps for your heart. It's like a pacemaker is electrical, and it starts your heart and it stops. This actually pumps the whole time. It basically is a valve.
So usually like the hearts for these patients are not like functioning well, so it's kind of automatically just kind of functioning for them.
They give this to people when they have heart failure or they're about to have it. And it can happen to people who are very young, and you can have congenital heart disease and you can get out that.
Interesting.
Then this person, you kind of both the batteries. You need a backup, and they're both connected. So it kind of switches between. So you don't actually, but you have to have two.
But
And
that's
then,
kind of
but also there's no feedback, so you don't really know how your batteries are doing. So you have to kind of keep charging them, and so you have to stay close to outlets. And the whole thing is horribly designed. But all medical equipment is horribly designed. It's all horrible.
So this could be the value the Mayo Clinics can give to provide to the patients to have like a little bit better kind of a device in the future, or better life in some sense.
Possibly, yeah. I mean, it's not something that the Center for Innovation does, because Mayo we don't make products. I mean, we have very few. I don't even make. We do a lot of publications, so we have a lot of like books, videos. I mean, we don't make medical products, and then we have a lab, biomedical lab, so we do a lot of testing. So we have different businesses, but we've never got into
product kind of manufacturing, or like.
and I don't think we're going to. So this is more about examining the experience and less about looking at the. I don't think Mayo is going to start making medical products.
And that's the idea around the consortium, is these companies have, so like the General Mills, Best Buy, Good Sam are the two right now, but they're looking at the healthcare market and different products that they're coming out with, and I think they want to try as best they can to ensure that what they're producing is producing that experience that's desired, and we're basically helping them facilitate that. So
maybe later on, maybe Samsung or like Hewlett Packard can actually come on and come in and just do the product for them.
Yeah, we would prefer if the work we did just kind of helped to highlight really important principles, aspects to be considered around the experience of aging, and then people when they work in that space they consider those.
What's the exact name of this
device?
It's called LVAD. It's a VAD.
Ventricular?
VAD. It's called
Ventricular assistant,
which is the valve that's put into your heart.
So the pacemaker is
It's different. Pacemaker is much smaller, and the pacemaker is under your skin, and then you have this thing has a port that comes out, and it's connected. This is connected inside the body, not a Molly, but this person here, that's Molly as well. It goes in through a port and it connects to. This is inside this woman's body.
Ventricular assistive device.
It's for short. It's called VAD.
심장을 대신 이렇게 뛰게 해주는 거라고.
It pumps and it's big. It's really big. When you see it outside, it's a big. It's almost like an artificial heart. And it's when you have heart disease or heart failure.
About the consortium, if you, let's say, if one of those are like Samsung or HP joins the consortium, and that kind of project goes on, and you actually find the opportunity for them, and they start to figure out the opportunity, and they produce those kind of new products, would there be any kind of chances that Mayo can actually get some of the equity out of that kind of a project, or?
Actually, they pay in to be a member of the consortium, so we get kind of an upfront payment, and then it's more of a collaborative, less capitalistic model. So we're here to help them and facilitate, and they've already paid us up front, and that's kind of that.
Okay. So probably like later on, if the project goes really well and like those kind of a mass production goes on,
we may have to renegotiate.
Yeah, maybe, but that's like not the core kind of idea about this collaboration, right?
Right.
Okay, got it. Because I was thinking, you are putting lots of human resource in this project, and they are the ones like getting the
benefit.
Exactly.
Right. Yeah.
But like the goal here is like giving the service or kind of a better life to the patients. So that's actually just still kind of working for the philosophy here.
And we get value out of it too. I mean, we get to be kind of on the cutting edge or the front edge of the products that are coming out and have influence to it, and also kind of get observations and patient experiences out of it too. So we're getting some information, and so it's. I mean, again, they pay us up front, and then we work with them. That's kind of how it works. Yeah, the FutureWorks model is more of what you're describing, where we're negotiating with the smaller companies, but we're negotiating for equity stake. Typically, it's a smaller investment because these companies are small and just about to take off, and they're lean and they need the capital. So it's risk for us, but it's a small risk because the dollars aren't tremendously large. And if they go really big, then there could be a fairly significant payoff with equity, and if they don't, they don't.
Okie
Well, how was the tour?
Perfectly good. Oh, learned so many things.
Good. Well, if you would like to flag any of the questions that we didn't have a chance to cover, I'd be happy to send you an email with responses, or if you want to send me other questions that you think of. I'm happy to do that. I gave you my business card, so I'm happy to help with any more information.
Okay, let me ask 2 or 3 questions.
Sure. Yes.
One interesting that I found here is usually companies who try to make some innovation try to stay confidential. They don't want other companies or other people to know,
like Apple,
what's going on. But you open the door to everyone, so everyone can come here and to look around and to share. Why do you adapt that parts or yeah.
Well, it's a really great question, and I think it's when we think about the challenges we're facing in health and healthcare, we really just believe in this whole idea of collaboration and partnerships. That we're not going to solve these problems by putting our head down and being insular in our thinking. It's really about connecting and working together. So we believe that just really as a principle of how we behave and how we act. You know, there are probably a couple of examples along the way where we've been a little more, you know, sort of confidential in what we're doing. But I would say really for our platforms, our portfolio of projects, what we put out on our internet site, and we in fact intend to do a lot more of that, and we're working on our next version. Even having things like a virtual tour to be able to come into meeting room spaces and platform spaces and see our work. So we're making a pretty major investment in sharing our stories with the world. So just believe it's important.
Yeah. I think also, you know, Mayo, the three shields, practice, research, and education. I think that the research and education shields really set a tone of, you know, a lot of researchers, mostly people kind of peer review and they share and they kind of build on each other's work, and then education is just, you know, about educating. So the fact that we have those three different, we were balancing that. I feel certainly being here that it's an academic institution. I mean, it's not a massive university, but it's an academic institution. It's not a business. It doesn't feel like it doesn't feel like a company or a business. It feels more like a school, like a university, where we're doing research, we're testing it, we're trying things, and then when we get it right, we tell other people about it. And that's, I think the shields really make it feel very kind of complete that way, rather than we're just a business.
And I think lastly too, it's hard to replicate. I mean, we've talked to a number of groups that are either wanting to start centers that are, you know, similar in concept or underway with it, and a lot of times our answers are, well, we've done this in the past, but I don't know if we'd recommend that you do that based on your environment or based on your culture or based on your demographics or how you're spread out or whatever. So it's really hard to it's such a unique thing, and if other groups have also their unique experiences, and so it's really hard to take what we do and apply it to another organization and say do the exact same thing and it will work the exact same way. So
I think there's go ahead. Well, there's aspects also, and I can recall a couple of conversations we've had in the past where, I mean, a large part of gaining credibility internally is having credibility external, and so sometimes you have to, I think, plan to tell stories, like when we go to conferences, and then people outside an institution, then we might get really good press, or someone might write up the center, and I think that really impacts internally, that gains us credibility. So I think as a group you have to really balance that. There's different ways for people to take you seriously, and I think if you're just focusing internally, you're missing the opportunity for people to start saying, oh, there's an article about Center for Innovation in a magazine, and then we can say, well, the industry is acknowledging the role that we're playing, and that helps us gain ground. So you kind of have to, I think that's a part of a thing that we've been aware of as well.
And you know, in so many ways it's going all the way back to our origins, because the Mayo brothers were very curious. They went out across the country and the world to learn new surgical techniques and bring them back to Mayo. And I think over the years we've become, it's really not, you know, lazy at all. I mean, the work ethic around here is amazing, but you know, Mayo, like many academic medical centers, can be very arrogant, that we think we have all the answers. And when we think about this whole area of innovation, and as we've talked about the need to transform the experience and delivery, I mean, this is big stuff, that it has to be about collaboration and partnerships. So it feels really good to know we're sort of connecting all the way back to our roots. And it's really getting out there and having the conversation. So another question, and then I'm so sorry because I'm going to have to leave. Okay. Yes, go ahead.
I remember that you mentioned before, but and when you told the institution to hire a designer 7 years ago, what was their initial response?
We really didn't tell them that. We
Yeah, you
kind
have-
of
yeah,
said that we were going to start
yeah.
building some focus, some focus capability around starting to build out experimentation like we do on the research side. So there were lots of ways we sort of communicated things where we really didn't know. But it was starting to bring in some different skill sets, and we called them analysts.
Yeah, yeah.
And I'm trying to think that in the very, very beginning was Maggie.
Maggie was an analyst, and
But-
Matt was an analyst.
So when they finally
That was a little sneaky, wasn't
came
it?
to know, you actually hired designer. What did they say?
Once we were ready to
Yeah.
kind of say, you know, here has been the experience. I mean, we get requests every single day and every single week now for our Center for Innovation and our user research and our designers. So I think as people have been exposed to what designers can bring to the table in the conversation and how we can do such a better job of understanding our patient needs, we can't meet all the requests. So it has been so warmly received, but it's been important that we've been able to, you know, start a bit small and get some experience and do this in this co-creation and partnership way with the clinical practice. So, you know, I'm just trying to think. But early on, we didn't really come right out and say, do we have permission to hire designers? Because no one would have understood what that was, and we didn't really know either. So,
It's an intimidating environment as a designer to come into as well, because you know it's. I mean, luckily as a discipline, we typically go into you don't go into a design community. You go and work in engineering, or you go and work in you know some industry where you're kind of assimilated into it. But I think for many of the designers here, you know, kind of coming into a medical environment it takes a certain kind of person. And we're very, very careful how we hire. We're pretty rigorous in the way we recruit. Lots of word of mouth, people who know someone who could work, and we talk about fit, like who's going to be able to cope with being here and have the skills. So we really handpick the people that come here. It's very
and
important.
we didn't even, you know, when I think back to the journey in the very beginning, we really didn't have the project management discipline either. So as I mentioned, we would recruit skill sets that don't exist, and we'd recruit them into the Center for Innovation, or we'd try to connect with other communities if the skill set existed. But at the time, we hadn't been building the PM project management discipline. So that's been really exciting to see. And now that's really taken off in the organization, where we have a whole project management discipline across Mayo. But it makes a lot of sense to us that our project managers and our designers and our physicians and our multidisciplinary team are here connected, working together. So
It's not question, but let me. I need some figures that when I write down article, I need some figures. So when can I find materials containing figures?
So there's a lot of materials in here, and we actually have some of the write-ups where we have, you know, data and results. So that might be a good starting point. And then if you have specific questions that go beyond that, you know, this would, for example, go back to care to distance and talk about the number of e-consults that we've conducted. And so you might find some of your answers there. And then if you'd like to follow up with me via email, you know, where you might have any questions at all,
I also
I'm
need
happy to do it.
pictures.
Pictures? Okay. I'm trying to think.
I mean, we should talk to Fran. I think Fran has. I know that she's had
Photos.
a couple of different times. She's had our photographers come through here for
Yeah.
different things.
We have some
we must
stock
have
photos.
Have
Yeah,
a lot.
you have
Yeah.
archive?
We do, and we can ask
Yeah,
our
I can-
communications director to help with that.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's Fran Dixon, so we're happy to put you in touch. If you just send me a note of, you know, what might be the 2 or 3 things or 4 things or whatever it is you need, we'll be sure that we get the information to you.
I will send you email
Yeah?
as
Sure.
soon as possible.
Sure. So now when are you heading back? You have a couple more visits this week?
I'm heading back tomorrow. We're actually like leaving the town tomorrow morning, so he's flying over to Boston. I'm going to San Francisco.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Good.
I will have another 2 interviews.
2 more interviews. Wow.
In
busy.
New Haven and in Boston.
Boston.
Near Boston. It's Lexington. I don't know.
Oh.
Yeah.
And you're going to go to New Haven? And you know what you would find on our internet site is Yale did a case study on our Center for
I know.
Innovation.
I
Do you know about that?
Yeah.
Okay, that's another
I
place
found
for.
the case, case study. covered by Yale and Harvard.
Okay,
The
good.
HPS case.
Good. Good. That's great. So, well, it's very, very nice to see you. I hope this was helpful.
Yeah.
Good.
Okay.
Good.
Thank you so much for inviting us in.
Yes, absolutely.
Enjoy your travels.
Thank you so much.
You're heading straight
It's a
back.
pleasure.
To
Very,
San
very
Francisco
nice
and back
to
to
see
Seoul.
you. Please be in touch. We're happy to
I
provide
know, I'd love to
additional
visit
information.
sometime.
Oh yeah, give us a call like
I
anytime
have
you.
so many of my really talented.
Keep bothering
And
you.
it's
No,
hard
no,
because
not
they
at all.
usually
It's not
would,
about
like,
their guys.
graduate,
My
they could stay, but
Really.
then they would head back.
It's
But I think
really fun to
good
share,
for
and it'll be
me. I mean, I
nice
can't-
to
as
stay in
a
touch. Just the connections of
design
what
skills, they're
happens with innovation in Korea, and I'll be very
try to
interested
do
to
this.
know.
Okay, I will
We
send
have
you
a-
email
we
and
have
and
a strong relationship
and
in
you-
Singapore, with
I
a group in
think
Singapore, and we've been to visit this group here. And I think it's
Some
the help,
response.
it's the government.
Sure,
help.
to a couple of questions that we
They
didn't.
were
Sure,
very
sure. So
interested.
I'll take a look and try to identify
And the
what I don't
UK,
think that we got to.
the
I don't know the
government,
material that you and Nick covered, but he and I can put our
a lot
heads
of
together on that.
programs that are
Mhm.
government funded
Couldn't
that use
cover
design, looking at
most of
education, crime
Okay,
already.
okay,
I mean,
okay,
so it's a
okay,
lot
good,
in
good,
the
Could you
education
tell-
as well.
Yep.
yeah,
So
also to
Singapore is
complete
really
the
investing a
Yeah.
lot in design.
the complete.
Yeah,
Sure,
they
sure,
figured
I'd
it
be
out.
happy to.
Well, nice to meet
Okay,
you.
take very good
Thanks a
care.
lot.
Thank you again.
Good to meet
Thanks
you.
for the
Great
visit.
to meet you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you
so
very
much.
much. Yeah, it was really nice to see you.
See you sometime.
Safe travels home.
We'll do
See
that.
you again.
Thank you so much.
Good to meet you. Do you need an escort, or is Linda Downey gonna walk you to where you need to be? Or
Oh, I think we can figure it out because I can't remember how we what came in. So
Okay.
we drive down there